IELTS Listening, version K0012.
You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to section 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear 2 friends called John and Anna talking about a holiday Anna has just had on Jackson Island. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hi, Anna. How was your holiday to Jackson Island?
It was good. There's quite a lot to see. It's quite a big island, really.
Yeah, I was thinking of going in the summer. So where would you recommend going on the island?
Well, the capital, of course, Camford. I stayed there with my cousin.
Anna stayed with her cousin, so cousin has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
Hi, Anna. How was your holiday to Jackson Island?
It was good. There's quite a lot to see. It's quite a big island, really.
Yeah, I was thinking of going in the summer. So where would you recommend going on the island?
Well, the capital, of course, Camford. I stayed there with my cousin.
What did you do there?
Well, actually, I spent most of my time there shopping.
So has it got good shopping centres?
Yes, but they're the same as at home, really. So I did all my shopping in the market, which is great.
What kinds of things are good to buy there?
Everything. But bags and shoes especially. Just make sure you've got cash with you, as most of the stalls don't take credit cards.
OK, that's good to know. Where else did you go?
Well, my cousin and I went to Newtown. She said it was famous for its modern architecture. We only had half a day there, so we took a bus tour around the town. But if I were you, I'd give the bus tour a miss. Unless you know a lot about architecture, the buildings all look the same. There's a museum, though. That's supposed to be good. You might like that.
OK, I'll give it a go.
Then after that, we headed for Golden Beach because we were going to meet up with an old friend that I hadn't seen for years. But we had to stay in a caravan as the hotels were all booked up.
Is it as pretty as it looks in the brochures?
Yes, it's very picturesque. We did some sailing on the most beautiful blue sea. It was so clear that you could see the bottom, even quite far out to sea. That part of the trip was great, and I'd have liked to have stayed even longer. I'd suggest staying there for a minimum of 4 days if I were you. We had 2 days there, and it wasn't nearly enough.
Sounds great. I'll put that on my must-do list. Was that the end of your trip?
No. After Golden Beach, we drove into the centre of the island, to White Mountain.
White as in the colour?
Yes. The island's great because you can go from the beaches up to the snowy mountain in a couple of hours. We took a tent because we were going to camp, but the weather was so cold, in fact it was snowing when I was there, that we stopped in a motel instead.
Did you go skiing then?
No, but we tried snowboarding and it was harder than it looked. It looks so easy when you see other people doing it, but it took me ages to get the hang of it. I wish I'd had some lessons, but you had to make your bookings in advance.
OK, I'll look into that. Thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10 on page 2. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
So are there any other tips or advice you could give me?
I don't know. Let me think. Oh, one place you should try to visit is this very quaint cafe, which is at the foot of the mountain. It has the best cakes ever. It's worth going there just for them.
I'll have to try those. So what other advice would you give?
Oh, let me think. We didn't really have any problems.
Well, how did you get around when you were there?
We wanted to get a motorbike at first. They're very cheap to hire and great fun to ride as the roads are very good. But it turned out not to be a good idea because the weather is so changeable. You'd be much better off in a car. There are plenty of places where you can hire them, and the roads are well signposted, so you won't get lost.
And presumably I can get a map when I get there?
Well, you can, but they are expensive. It'd be better to get one here before you go.
Great. That's been really useful. Thank you.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2 on page 3. Section 2. You will hear an Arts Center director giving information to a group of people attending an arts weekend. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15 on page 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to Grampic Arts Campus for our annual residential arts weekend. I'm Bob Grain, director of the programme. It's a large campus, it's quite easy to get lost, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of the most important places here. Right, I'm glad you all found your way here to reception. First, a word about parking. We do have a free temporary car park here. And for those of you coming by bike, the bike sheds aren't far from reception. You'll see them on your left as you walk down South Lane towards the residential rooms. Now, dinner is in the dining room at 7:30. If you need something to eat now, the snack shop is still open. The quickest way to get there is to leave here, go straight through the office, they won't mind, the ornamental ponds in front of you, and the snack shop is the building on your left. The fitness facilities are even better this year. We've outgrown the old fitness rooms, which were next to the office. To find the new fitness rooms from here, walk up to North Road. They're at the end in the last block next to the dining room. Now, your bedrooms are quite near. You can see the single rooms in the tall block to the far left of us across South Lane. Couples and families are in our family rooms, right next door to them. I'm afraid there aren't any TVs in the rooms. We ask you to keep the noise down, please. We have a TV room. You can probably see it from here. It's right opposite us in the big red building.
Before you hear the rest of the information, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20 on page 4.
But there are gaps in our timetables for some extra options. You may have this information in your brochure, but there have been some changes. Firstly, the drama option. I'm afraid our theatre and practice rooms here are being refurbished and are out of use. We decided against using our sports hall, and instead we're going to use our lecture rooms, which we've converted into a theatre for the weekend. There are also changes to the photography option. This year, this option isn't open to everyone. We decided for practical reasons to reserve it for beginners with no previous experience. Let me remind you that you don't need any special equipment. That's provided. The tutors have said that unfortunately they can't accept parents with children because that proved too disruptive last time. But if you're over 18, that's fine. On to the writing option. Previous courses looked at starting your novel. This year, we wondered about focusing on the techniques of writing different types of poetry. However, as a result of many requests, we've decided the workshop will concentrate on helping each participant write one or more short stories. Poetry may be some future time. Now, music. The brochure says you'll go to a concert. That's a misprint. Instead, you'll be writing and putting on your own performance, a concert for yourselves. Unfortunately, the singing tutor is ill. It's too late to replace her, so we've had to cancel singing lessons. Apologies for that. Finally, the creche. This is available for all families on the programme, and there are still some places left. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that the charge for this hasn't increased since last year. Lunch is included, but of course parents are welcome to collect their children and spend the lunch break with them. May I remind you that any fees for this service must be settled in full at the end of the last day. So, has anybody got any questions?
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3 on page 5. Section 3. You will hear two trainee teachers called Dean and Hannah talking about their recent teaching practice in an elementary school. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24 on page 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Dean. Did you have a good weekend?
Yes. It was good to relax after a whole week of teaching practice. I really enjoyed the experience, though.
Yes, so did I. And I think it went well. Anyway, are you okay to talk about the report we've got to write on the geography lesson we taught together? I was thinking we could make notes now and then divide the actual writing up between us.
Sure. Good idea. Let's begin with our lesson aims, shall we?
Right, well, I know the main one was getting the class to think about how people in different parts of the world are connected to each other through the things they buy and sell.
Yes, we took that from the syllabus for grade 4, and then we decided to use pencils as our example, because they're relatively simple in design and everyone's used a pencil at some time or other. We should include that information too.
Right, and we also wanted to get the class thinking about how things are moved around the world in different ways, from the farms and the mines to the factories and then the stores. That wasn't in the core syllabus. I think we added that ourselves.
Yes, I think you're right.
Okay, then the last section of the report contains a post-lesson analysis.
We have to mention any problems we identified in our lesson when we taught it. So, any ideas?
Well, I know we were really satisfied with our handouts and worksheets. We both thought they'd been at just the right level for the class. And I don't know about you, but I think we worked well as a team.
Absolutely. Neither of us was too dominant, and we supported each other. Personally, the thing I think we didn't get right was the way we paced things. Some things seemed to be rushed, and others seemed to drag out too long. I don't know how you feel about that.
The same as you. If we did the same lesson again, I'd want to make some adjustments to that, but keep the same basic lesson plan.
Okay, we see eye to eye on that. But there's one other thing. At the time, I seem to remember we both thought that organizing the children in sets of 6 didn't work very well, and that pairs would have been better for certain tasks, so that the Shire kids got more chance to contribute.
Yes, I remember that too, and we should put it into our report as well.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30 on page 6. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Now, should we go over our lesson plan together before we write the report? It seems ages ago now.
Fine. Well, the whole lesson was based on the production and distribution of pencils. First, we gave out the pencils and got the students to decide what they're made of. Then, when they'd come up with all 5 of the component materials, we talked about which countries produce most of these materials.
Oh, yes. And we got volunteers to come to the front and mark the location of those on a map of the world. I remember they were really keen to volunteer. We had to stop them from calling the answers out loud.
Right. Then we brainstormed all the different ways of getting goods from one place to another, and what the advantages and disadvantages of each one would be. I remember one girl talking about using horses.
That's right. She seemed to be a bit stuck in the past. It was hard not to smile.
Yes. After that, we put them in small groups, and each group represented each of the countries on the map. They had to use their atlases to decide an itinerary for sending their raw materials to the USA, specifying the different ports and places on the way there.
That's right. And by the time they'd done that, it was break time.
And after the break, they had to imagine they were pencil manufacturers in Chicago and fill in details on a worksheet about how they dispatch their pencils to different parts of the country.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And then we had a class discussion about whether people will still be using pencils in 2050 and whether the design of pencils is likely to change. And to round the lesson off, the kids had to spend 10 minutes planning a short presentation for another class about possible developments. And that was it.
Good. So I'll write up that part.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 4 on page 7. Section 4 on page 7. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking to a group of environmental science students about fuel made from biomass. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone. In this course, we've been discussing the principles of sustainable development, and now we're going to look at some of the ways in which these principles are being put into practice. Today, I'm going to talk about the use of biomass. And for those of you who don't know what biomass is, it's plant material, usually agricultural waste, such as sawdust or straw. And briquettes made out of biomass are used as fuel, either in the home or in industry. I'll start with the benefits. Using briquettes has a financial benefit because they make use of waste products as raw materials, so there isn't any cost involved for that. Another advantage is convenience. Handling briquettes is cleaner than handling materials like wood or charcoal. Also, briquettes are less trouble to store because they're a uniform size and shape. Right, let's look briefly now at how these briquettes are made. There are two basic methods of manufacture. The first method uses machinery. At the initial stage, all the loose plant material is ground into a powder and then mixed with other materials. Next, a machine compresses the biomass mixture, and that process raises the temperature and causes it to melt. The machine forces the biomass mixture out through rectangular or circular holes. Then, as the pressure decreases, the mixture cools and becomes solid again, and that's how the briquettes are formed. It's important to point out that with this method, electricity is essential to operate the machinery, and the exact amount you need depends on the type of biomass you use. But generally, the amount required is only 3% to 9% of the energy that's produced by the briquettes when they are burnt. The second method involves making briquettes by hand. This method is suitable when the biomass is mainly composed of material that doesn't melt, like paper. The biomass is made into a paste by adding water and, in addition, something sticky such as starch. This mixture is then shaped, using either a simple metal press or bare hands. So where is biomass fuel used, and how extensively? Well, it's difficult to obtain detailed figures, but it's been used for several years in Europe and the USA, mainly for agriculture. And since 2000, there's been a rapid increase in the production and use of briquettes made out of wood waste. I can give you a ballpark figure. In 2010, about 5 million tonnes were used in Europe. Some of these had to be imported from the USA. Moving further east, both India and China have been producing biomass briquettes since the 1990s. Detailed figures are hard to come by, but in China, in 2002, the number of factories producing biomass briquettes had increased to approximately 600, and production is still growing. I don't have information about Africa in general, but I can give you an example of one company in Uganda which is producing briquettes. Most of the company's customers are public institutions like schools and universities that provide hot meals for their students. The other main users are businesses that need a source of heat for producing their products. OK, well, how viable are biomass fuels like these in economic terms, and what is likely to happen in the future? Well, the answer depends partly on the price of the fuels that they replace, and that varies from place to place. But in general, the demand for biomass fuels is almost certain to grow, and that can only benefit the environment. Let's turn now to another facet of society.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.